Alright, so welcome back to the stream. Today I'm going to be showing you how I take really bad, less than perfect reference photos and turn them into a new and fresh design. Now, welcome back to my channel. This is Kelly Bixler Studio. I'm Kelly. And welcome to my studio where I'm doing things a little differently today. I've been having some problems with Photoshop, so I'm actually trying out a totally new program today, which should be interesting. I've actually never used this. It's called Krita. So we're going to be getting into that in a minute. And as we go along, I'll be showing you also what I think about the program. Again, I've never touched it before. So it's going to be a bit of a learning curve. But the other thing I'm going to be doing is taking reference photos that I've been looking at from this website here. This is SS Maritime. And I'm going to save you the scrolling. I've already picked out a few photos. But this is the same website that I was using for last week's design too, where I was looking at old ocean liners, specifically from the 1910s and teens, and looking at their interiors and picking out elements to turn into a design. So I've already picked out a few. Let me move this off the screen. I'll change things around here. So here I have a couple images of interiors that I'm going to be working with. I was trying to find things from the 20s and 30s to be working on here, but what I found was a lot of the ships from that era had interior designs that harken back to older eras. So say, eras like Georgian, Edwardian. I'm not really sure when the Edwardian era ended, but definitely Georgian and Jacobean. There's some Louis XV in here. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take elements from these and just start sketching them, and I'm just going to play around with them today. Since I don't have Adobe Illustrator at all, I'm not going to be able to make any patterns this week, but whatever I come up with this week, that's what I'll turn into a pattern for next week. So feel free to jump into the chat at any time. You can ask me questions live about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, anything you want really. Just talk about anything in the chat there. So I'm going to be moving these pictures up, and I'm going to be bringing them back down one by one because, like I said, this Krita is a new program to me, and I haven't figured out anything about keyboard shortcuts yet, so I kind of need the entire screen to work with it. So I think I'm going to start with, let me move a couple of these out of the way. I think I'm going to start with this chair over here. And there's actually two chairs here. Let me see if I can. Okay. So there's two chairs here with two different designs on them, and I'm going to try drawing sections from each of them. And oops, okay. All right, so not exactly sure what happened there. Let me just delete this and see if I can bring that picture back up again. All right. Going to try to shrink it down. Or not. I think we'll just start drawing. So let me find a pencil. Okay, so apparently I can't just have picture on picture here. So I'm just going to move this then up here. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be drawing this side chair here that's pulled up to this table. I'm going to be drawing some of these little elements here. I'm not sure, maybe I can pull this into Krita. I'm not sure how that works. Let me see if I can place something. No. All right, so I'm just going to have it up on the other screen, and I'm just going to use that. Eventually, if I have to use this again, I'll put another screen on the live stream so you can see what I'm looking at if I have to do this again. I found that when I just pulled the picture into Krita, I'm sure it's just that I don't know how to use it quite yet, but I didn't like how it brought the picture into Krita. So maybe I'll try that. No, I guess I'm not trying that again. So I'm not going to worry about that. And I'm just going to use the picture that I have up. Okay. So the first thing that I've noticed about using Krita versus using Photoshop is how they show the brushes over here. So I'm over on the right-hand panel, and they have all brushes, and they have like an image of what the brush looks like, which is helpful since I've never used this. I think you can also show it in different views. Let's see, details. Okay, so it just tells you like what they are. I don't think that's really necessary. I'm going to shrink down the size of the icon a little bit. Let me see what that looks like on the stream. Yeah, it's fine. And then go back to thumbnails. And I'm just looking for, it moves around a lot. I'm not sure I love that, but it's okay. This is a free program. So as far as free programs are concerned, at first glance, it's looking pretty good. I'm sure there are people that have a lot more experience with this than I do, especially since I just started it. So over here we have the layers panel. I can add in, oops, okay. So I'm guessing that's matte. Nope, that's copies. And then, interesting. Okay, so I just want to add a regular layer. So I'm going to add a layer and then I'm going to pull up the brush, which is over here, and then try to find something that is a little bit darker. So Control Z still works, which is good to know. And this one also has like different weights. So I can draw it skinny or I can draw it really big. All right, so I have a new layer and I'm going to pull up that photo. So let's see. Oh, okay. My photos are disappearing now too. My computer is having some issues today, so I'm going to work with this one instead. Maybe. Where's that other one? I also have some sketches that I can kind of work from and get some ideas from. Let me pull up one of those so you can see it. Let's see. I'll pull up this one. So I'm just going to open this and drag it in, so I'm not going to copy and paste it. So this is one that I have sketched off, sort of a wallpaper design, and it kind of has these frames with flowers around them, and then like these sort of chain elements that go in between each of the frames, which I think is interesting. And I think I might want to take this sort of idea, maybe that's something I'll play with today, this idea of this frame with the backing elements behind it. So something that's connecting these frames together. So that's something to play with. Let's see. I really like these chairs here. Let me see if I can zoom in on these. So it's really hard to see in this picture. This is like the perfect example of really grainy photo reference that I'm talking about, but I can get the idea of how this is. First of all, I can see it's sort of reflected. So you have this element up here with these leaves, and then you kind of have the same element down here, and it's got like some filler aspects. So it's almost like a kind of reversed medallion sort of a look, which I think is interesting. Let's see if there's any other good patterns in here to look at. I like this wave pattern that's going on here. That's a really nice border that's kind of going in between the two floors here. There's also these railings here, but I have better pictures of those railings. So this has a very, like, especially with these elements here, this is very like a Greco-Roman sort of look here on the architecture. It's also got some geometric patterns going around the room. And I think I had another one open. Apparently not. So let me open that other one again. Let's see, it was this one. Let me try pasting it into Krita again. I was having issues with copying it and then getting it to show up at that size. Yeah, see, I'm not, okay, we'll just ignore that. So let's bring this back over here. This is a prime example of what to do when everything goes haywire. I really like this one, how it's very, instead of being really chunky leaves and elements, it's got these really flowing details, which I like, and it still has these floral elements. It's looking like this is probably a 2, maybe 3 color pattern based on this photo. You can see that there's these grape leaves here and clusters of grapes, and kind of mixes different flowers and clusters of grapes together. So that's really interesting. See if I can pull those together. I'm going to pull that right to the side here. Again, I'll try to figure out how to have these bigger in the future so I can see those. Oh, I see. Okay. So I have these 2 chairs. And I have this here, which may or may not get incorporated into this. This is what I'm looking at for my reference. And right now, all I'm going to do is kind of get an idea of what these elements might look like. So I'm not doing like anything really exact here. It's just a matter of figuring out how this is going to look all together. So let me pull these back over to my other screen, and I'm just going to start sketching those. I need to pull up. Okay. Shrink that. Okay. So far I've noticed Control Z still works, which is nice. So one thing that I'm noticing on here is it's kind of got this like kind of a lyre sort of look. I'm not really too worried about what I draw on the other side right now, because when I do take this into Illustrator eventually, this is going to get just sort of repeated. So I'm just going to draw one half, and then I'm going to flip it over once I get it into Illustrator. So I'm going to come off this side. I'm not liking this pen, and the pencils are a bit light. I'm not sure how to adjust any of the pens or pencils that are in here. So if you're familiar with Krita and you know how to change the brush presets, what does this do? Nope, that's not helpful. Let me know how to do that. So let's see, I'm just going to delete that layer and start again, and I'm going to try to find something that's more like a brush. I mean, more like a pencil, or no, that's better for painting. What does this do? Oh, is that the brush settings? Maybe? That's a lot of settings. That seems like an unnecessary amount of settings. Yeah, there's probably times when that's useful, but the problem with things like this, when you have a whole bunch of settings that you can adjust, is that it's too many settings to adjust, and now I don't know how to get rid of it. Okay. I'm hoping that this program is a little less buggy than it's currently seeming, because now I just have this brush presets thing stuck in the middle of the window. That's great. This video is going to need some editing. All right, there we go. Let me put that back. Oh, I found my picture. Let me put that back. Yeah, this video is going to require some editing when I'm done. All right, so apparently you can adjust the brush presets. It's not really something that I want to do, though, in the middle of working with it. So figuring out how to, like the preset, they need to be simpler, essentially, is what I'm saying. Like presets should be really easy to mess with, and they don't seem to be at the moment. And yeah, get a chunkier pencil maybe. If you are looking for a free alternative to Photoshop, I would say that with some effort in figuring out all the little details of this, this does seem like a decent Photoshop, again, like, I wouldn't say substitute, but like a decent Photoshop option. If you have Photoshop and it's working properly, I wouldn't see this as a decent Photoshop option, but it's early days. All right, so I have this sort of shape here. It's kind of lyre shape, but I'm actually going to change that a little bit to be more like a vase shape. I'm liking one side versus the other at the moment. And then it has some elements here that kind of curve back on each other. So something a little bit like this. And I think it's supposed to be a well, I'm not really sure what it is, but I'm going to draw it something like this. And that has a stem that comes down, curves down, and then there's another leaf element that comes up below that. So right now I can already see that this is too busy for what I was looking for, but it gives me good ideas for elements to use in the future. So this, it has like this little, what would you call these? Almost like snowdrop flowers coming out here. And this is kind of like a bit like this. Almost like it has scales, for lack of a better way of putting it, and it kind of curves back on itself here. So in this flower, it's got a bit of this kind of a look going to it. And then it kind of curves in whatever direction you want to make it curve into, because the petals and things are like not, they're individual, so you can curve them in any direction you want, which kind of has, it's an interesting look. Not really sure what, oh geez, that was the cat banging against the door. I'm not really sure what I would do with that, but that's that kind of look. And then it has this element over here where it's more like a snowdrop. So you have kind of flower petals, flowers coming off of it like this, and they have very triangular shapes. It's very simple. And then we'll just drop a leaf in there. What else do we have here? So it's got some acanthus leaves, and acanthus leaves that curl back on themselves. So let's try drawing those in. When I do, if I was doing the acanthus leaves to actually make them look a little bit better, what I would do is kind of give myself direction for where the points are going to come off. So for example, in this side piece here, I've given myself the places where I'm going to have those petals of the leaf, where the separations of the leaf come off. So this is how I would draw a much cleaner version. I wouldn't bother with this though until I was just about ready to take this into Illustrator, because at the moment right now I'm just working from speed just to get things done. So let's see, what else do we have? I like the twining that it does. So it has these elements that kind of twine back on themselves, and it kind of reminds me of a sketch that I did the other day. Let me pull that up. Let's see, where'd it go? Here it is. So this is a sketch I did the other day of some elements. I don't even remember where I found these. But I really like how some of these have these little delicate twining elements. Let me just zoom in here. These two in particular. These ones are like the wreath sheep motif, but these ones have like those delicate leaves and twining spirals that kind of come back on themselves. And when I was originally thinking of this idea, that was the kind of look I was going to go for. So I think I'm going to use those twining elements that I see in this pattern over here and kind of figure out the basic shape that that is going in, and then I'm going to incorporate these little designs here, these little motifs, and figure out how I can have the leaves that curl back on themselves like that. So I'll put that over here. All right, so it's kind of got a diamond shape. And then from here, it spirals out and spirals down. And then inside, it kind of repeats on itself. So it has these elements that repeat on itself. And then at the top, it flips back out. And there's an element here and an element here. And here it's got like little things that go off like this. I don't think I like that. I'm going to take those off actually. And then, unfortunately, I cannot see the bottom of this at all. The only view I have of this chair, of this pattern, is on this chair, and it cuts it off right there. So I'm going to kind of wing that part, but I'm liking this shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these or hide them. Can I hide them? I can hide them. And then start on a new layer. So I'm going to work on that kind of basic shape again. So we have this open diamond. And the original is a lot curvier than this, but this is an easy way of getting the shape without, you know, a lot of fussing with the details, because the details aren't what I need right now. And come off like that, and then it kind of goes up there and down. And up like that. And then I kind of see like maybe there's something kind of holding this. So imagine like leaves holding that like that. And then this curves back off and has these elements here. Let's see, can I duplicate this? Okay, I'll just draw it again. I think this I would do in a repeat that's a bit offset, so kind of a half drop repeat. So it's got this and that. So it doesn't line up at the bottom, but what it does is it kind of, this kind of connects at the bottom somewhat. Let's see. All right, so that one's too close. Let's see, is there an eraser? Oh, there's an eraser. And so some of the keyboard shortcuts are the same as in Photoshop, which is good to know. But some are not. So I don't know if there's a list of keyboard shortcuts somewhere that, interesting. Okay. If there's a list of keyboard shortcuts that are printed somewhere, that would make it a lot easier to work with this program, I think. But, you know, this is okay for now. Can't get that same brush to work again, so I'll just go to a different one. It's kind of looking a bit like a bug right now. It's funny how many of these design elements end up looking a bit like a bug when you're working on them. Not exactly sure why that ends up. I think it's just because I'm drawing it as like a skeleton frame. Okay, so I would put these closer, but it's kind of giving that sort of repeat that this would then be duplicated up here again, and then, you know, same thing over here. So this would come down like this. So it's giving me an idea of what the repeat is. I think though that I want the repeat to be a lot looser. You know, unfortunately I had a really good idea that I drew in Photoshop the other day, which I can't open. So I'm trying to remember what it looks like, which isn't the easiest thing in the world. I'm just going to delete that and start again. I should have saved it, but I didn't do that. Now, one thing I don't know how to do is how to zoom out. Okay, so you can use plus and minus keys to zoom in and out on Krita. Let's see if I can remember that design at all. So that one was based sort of on a look more like this one. So it was more of a damask pattern, but it had floral elements like this one. And I think that's what I want to combine. I want to combine a loose, like very small, let me pull this into, this very like tight and twisted elements here with some more damask elements. So I want to combine the two. All right, let's see. We'll start with, maybe if we did like a damask element here, and it's got some curving and twisting to it. And then this kind of like flows off into maybe something a little more delicate on the side. And maybe it does it on the same over here. And then this repeated in a way that it brings the main element, and then, whoops, the main element would have to be higher, and then the flower element would kind of end up being over on the side. So how would that line up then? Something like that. A lot of what I do with sketching ends up looking exactly like this. It's just kind of really loose shapes and ideas, and then eventually I refine them a bit so that it's something more usable, but only eventually. And my sketchbook, like, I'm sure we'll do a sketchbook tour at some point, but it is not a pretty sketchbook. I do not even believe in having pretty sketchbooks. I think, you know, for me, it's a waste of time. It's a lot better for me just to get the ideas down. So I know a lot of people like to have that, and it looks pretty. But for me, I'm just looking for the ideas. And the ideas are not always, you know, not always the prettiest pictures to draw, because a lot of times my sketchbook just looks like this. And he's got these little bits. So this is kind of the element that I drew before. So I'm not exactly sure how I want to combine that. Although it's looking like it would combine pretty well with this. This idea of the twining tendrils and then the flowers and these larger grape leaves here. So I'm going to draw a couple of these grape leaves to see what they're about. So they have like a central stem, and then they come off in sort of distinct leaves that are distinct from each other. So you have one there, one kind of here, and one kind of here. And then these are lobed. So they have a central element to them, like a line. What's that called? The vein. And then they have these lobes. And I'll go back over this with another marker here. Let's see. So this has, ooh, that's chunky. Okay. So this has a central vein, like this, and then these come off, yeah, they're pretty separated. They come off as separate entities. So it's a bit like this. So that's what those grape leaf elements look like. And combining that with these more twirling elements, I think would look nice. Are there, hold on, I have a lot of windows all randomly sized here. Okay. Are there other repeats that you could use? Does it come down to personal preference? A lot of times it comes down to the shape of the element. So for example, if there's, you know, a shape element that looks like a diamond, then it's about figuring out, like, if you look at whatever element you draw. So for example, this over here, this leaf is essentially a polka dot, right? So as long as you can fit it into a pattern with, well, polka dots are easy. You can use polka dots in any way you want. So you could scatter them. I could change the size of the leaf. I could do whatever I want here. Something like a diamond, you can do the same thing. And it's about just looking at what sort of shape your element fits into best. So what I was looking at with the element I was drawing was a shape like this, a pattern like this. So the diamond elements repeat on the diagonal, and they kind of interlock with each other. So, you know, there's this one here and this one here, and then these two kind of come in and interlock with that. So it's a bit down to personal preference, but when I'm looking at it, it's mainly about what kind of shape does the element fit into. So if I look at this twirly one that I drew, this is essentially a triangle as I have it. So it's about figuring out what kind of design is going to work best with this. So if I take this little, yes, it's like a home base sort of shape. and then try to figure out like what are ways that I can fit this together like a puzzle so that it looks nice. So I could just line them right up like this, and then I could fill in this gap by reversing it. So you can do things upside down too. They don't have to be all straight up and down. But it's just a matter of personal preference in figuring out what kind of style of shape you're looking for, but also figuring out what works with the shape that you drew. So let's take out all of that and get a new layer. So with looking at the elements that I have in front of me, let me pull this chair up again. So looking at this chair, when I have those twining elements of this chair and I combine it with these twining elements here, there's definitely some things on here I don't like the way that they look. They're not going to work with the idea that I have right now. Like these scaled flower things, not really what I'm going for. But I like these grape leaves. I like the idea of having flowers incorporated. Maybe not those sorts of flowers, but I'm definitely liking the grape leaves because it reminds me of the twining of the vines. I may or may not include grapes themselves. I wonder what grape flowers look like. I think they're very small and insignificant, but let me just take a look at those. Yeah, so let me pull this down. So grape flowers themselves aren't really looking like too much. So that would be a hard thing to incorporate the actual flower. So essentially it's just the sprig of grapes and then these tiny little flower structures at the end of the sprigs of grapes. This one it's kind of like a foam flower sort of look, which would be really difficult to draw. So I'm not going to attempt that at the moment. So I might stick with doing grapes if I incorporate those. So I definitely am going to draw a bunch more grape leaves. I'm going to pull up some reference of actual grape leaves. Because it's all well and good to work with bad reference. I think that's great. But you also need the actual reference, because a lot of times, like, you don't have these things, memorized in your head. I don't want to eat the grape leaves. Hold on. Okay, plant. So when I'm looking at the actual reference, there is separation depending on the type of grape. There's some separation between the lobes, but not on a lot of them. And I actually want to ignore that aspect of the real leaf. And I want the lobes because it gives more texture into the pattern. Like this one. That's a good one right there. That has some more separation. Oh no, I lost it. Okay. Well, I wonder if let's just try that. Okay, so it's a tiny little picture. I'm not sure if it gets any bigger. Oh, it does. That's nice. Okay. So, yeah, all right. So that's how you put pictures into, what am I working in? Krita. So I pasted it, and then I'm not sure what this is called, but there's some tools over here if they're like moving things. So I use those. Let me just find out where. So this is from An Essential Guide to Grapevines. Don't know where that is though. Glad it wasn't scary. Okay. So let's just draw a couple of these leaves just to get an idea of what the grapevine leaves will look like. And I'm also going to draw these tendrils because the tendrils don't curl back on themselves in this picture. An actual grape plant, they can be, especially if they're like clinging onto something. So I'm going to try to get that idea too, and also look at how the leaves come off of the plants. So for example, I'm drawing this one towards the back here. So it comes off, and then the leaf kind of curls back on itself, and then it goes off. And the stem kind of goes off like that, and then there are separate lobes in here. This one's a little more difficult to see because of the angle, but it's kind of curved back on itself right there. So then the point is underneath it like that. And let's see, it looks like it has some leaf veins that go off to the side. And then it has a very jagged edge. I want to round this out a bit because it'll work better with my pattern. So I'm drawing from the reference, but I'm also ignoring the reference when it's gonna work better for me to change it. With something like pattern design, that's something that I do often. If I was doing an illustration, it would definitely depend on what I was actually doing in the illustration. So that's how that one comes off, and then the vine itself comes around like this. And it looks like these tendrils, so it looks like the tendrils kind of branch off from each other. It's got this little leaf here. Let's draw that one. What I'm doing is called the envelope method of sketching. So instead of worrying about the exact shape of the object, I'm just sketching the very outside, and I'm going to come in and refine it as I go along. So you can see with this leaf, I'm only worrying about the lobes now and where they show up, as opposed to, really going in there and trying to make sure, like drawing it, line by line, like this. Because if I did this, like, one thing you're going to see pretty quickly is it's going to go rogue. Like the size isn't going to quite line up with where things are. And it's actually not too bad. It's not too bad right now because it's a leaf. It's not a person, for example. But even then, like, it's very side heavy. I don't like that. So the envelope method essentially makes it a lot easier to figure out where everything is in proportion. And then you can go back in and adjust it and get things to line up the way you want. Like that. Okay. And then put in the center vein. And then the veins on the side. So there's essentially five lobes to this leaf. But I'm only worrying about putting in the veins that go to these 3 larger ones, because it looks like in the structure of the leaf, that's where the emphasis is. I'll put that structure like that. I'll just erase this one. Okay, so this bigger leaf here kind of crosses this point. I'm looking at the angles too. So what is the angle of this leaf? And what are the kind of connections between this bigger leaf here and this smaller leaf? You can see they're really close together. So I'm going to put that mark in. And then it comes down almost the same. So this small leaf, I'm using that as my measurement, and it comes down almost as far as that small leaf is in size. So I'm going to come down to here. And I'm going to come out to about here. I'm just going to ignore that line. And then comes up over the edge and then up to here. I have no idea where that came from, so just erase that. Okay, so I'm going to put in the center of the leaf. I'm going to play with the location of this a little bit, just so I'm not drawing underneath the photo. And I'm just going to put in the major landmarks at this point. This leaf has shape sort of like this and curls back on itself, and then it goes down on it in this direction. The envelope method, it doesn't mean that what you're drawing is inside that shape the whole time. It means that it's kind of giving you the outer look of it, and you can adjust it from there. So it's about basically the path of least resistance. So you pick, where is the shape essentially going, and then you're going to fix it as you go. So these veins all seem to come from the same point. So if I put those in going backwards too, they're going to go to the same place, which is good to know. And I'm going to carve this in quite a lot more than it is in reality, and then round it off quite a bit more. And over here, I'll bring that in nice and tight, because I'm liking how it's looking with the rounder, a little bit pointier there, but the rounder edges to it. Let me see if I can this point, I'm just kind of inking in a very loose representation of what I'm thinking, just to get an idea, because my sketch is getting a little bit too messy. Yeah, that's sort of right. And then for these, if I'm putting this in Illustrator, I'm gonna keep these lines a bit short, just to give some variation. Although I could also like cut out the shape inside of Illustrator. That's an option too, because that would give a bit more texture to the pattern. So all of this would be cut out and different, probably the background color. Let's see. And then this one here. At this point, I'm not really looking at the reference. I'm kind of just looking at my sketch and seeing how it's working together. Let's see, that gets blocked there. And then for this leaf, I'm going to, again, round it off a bit more. Because the way it is in reality, it's very spiky on the edges, and that's not something I want to have in my pattern, this particular pattern. And I want to tighten this loop even more. Actually, I'm going to have that overlap. So if I'm putting this, if I was going to put this particular image into Illustrator, that's what I would do. I would overlap this little segment right here, just add some more texture. Alright, so I think I would leave it as the veins as opposed to doing this, removing the center. So that's good to know. And I'm liking this kind of, it's kind of like a, let me go back to my sketching. This kind of pentagon sort of leaf arrangement here. So we have one leaf here, one leaf coming off this way, and then just two tinier sections of leaf but coming back this way. Okay. Let's work in a different layer, see how we can add to that. I'm going to try bringing in these photos. I'm not sure how to do that. Nope, wrong photo. Hold on. Whoa, okay. I don't know what that is. Okay, that's interesting. So some of the shortcuts are the same, some are not the same. And I haven't quite figured out which ones are which. So I'm gonna probably be doing a little working back and forth. This is gonna be really hard reference to see on this screen. We'll see what happens. Yep, that's, oh there, oh that's a little better. Okay. So now I'm going to work on just kind of sketching out these elements. I'm going to focus just on, how do I change the color? So I'm going to focus just on half of this. That did not change the color. Okay. Just on half of this little chair right here. So just this bit. Yeah. Let me erase that. Of course I can't erase it. Alright, so I'll just draw on that. Let's switch back and forth. Okay. So I'm going to draw, kind of thinking back to the grapevine over here, how it kind of twisted back around on itself. Oh, it draws with your finger too. That's great. How it draws back around on itself. I'm going to use that kind of idea when I'm looking at the chair here and kind of drawing from that reference. So I'm going to keep that in mind and kind of draw these twining elements kind of coming back on themselves, but then also moving off, like dividing straight off of each other. Like that. And then this kind of has this leaf coming down this way. And then I think I would do, so the original design kind of has more of a diamond shape to it. I'm going to come up here into some sort of flower element and then come off this way in another grape leaf element. And then I need to repeat these things a little bit because I have it very, it's way too uniform at the moment. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try putting one of those grape leaves right here and see how that works. This is very much a square, so if I was going to put this in a repeat, right now it's absolutely a square, right? So you can just chop it off right like that. And then essentially, you know, you turn this 90 degrees and it's totally square. Not 90 degrees, but like 45 degrees, you know what I mean. But you turn it just a little bit and it's totally square. And then that repeat can pretty much be used in anything. So I could do, obviously you could do stripes. All the stripe is a square repeated, right? But you could also do what is then called a half drop. So that's dropping one of the squares down part way. And you can also do one that goes a bit further than that. So let me just draw a couple squares. And then, so with this one, we're almost dropping it almost all the way down. So this is more of like a brick repeat. Be a little too square for a brick repeat, but you get the idea. I don't know that I want this to be so square, but that seems to be where it is heading. So at the moment, I'm going to play with that. Let me see if I can, let's see. How do I change the brush size? Okay, that makes it bigger. So instead of this square, I'm kind of looking for more of a diamond. So a diamond is just sort of a stretched out square, but I want it to be very diamond shaped as opposed to, you know, right angle square just turned on its side. So I'm going to start with laying out that shape on this new layer. And I'm going to try working in that shape. Okay. So in this, instead of kind of coming across it like that, I'm going to come up. So we'll do something kind of curving off this way and then curving off this way. And then it kind of doubles back on itself like that. So let me just darken this up a bit. Yeah, I like that better. So I'm just gonna draw that again. Well, that's kind of interesting, but then I don't really know that it fits with my current idea. This is how a lot of my stuff ends up working, that I have this idea and it starts off in one direction and then I end up going totally in a different way, although it's not. I can kind of see how this could work. That's actually not too bad. I like that. This would be a pretty simple thing to complete in Illustrator. I don't know that I would even take it much further than what I currently have. But I kind of like it. It sort of has that look that I was going for, which is a little simpler, a little bit more like more twining and simple, but still elegant. So I'm going to work on how would these, let me pull that sketch down again. Let me find it. So how would these double back on themselves, like in this sketch? I still want to have that aspect of it. So let me see if I can paste that in here. Nope. Okay. So I'm just going to draw that from memory then. So I'm going to put another layer on top of here, and I'm going to start to refine this. So if I was taking this in Illustrator today, this is what I do right before I take it in Illustrator, because I don't want it to go too far, because then that's how you end up with essentially a sketch that ends up looking too stiff. That's what's happened. You've taken it too far, and then you're kind of going over it again and working it over again, which I don't want to do. So I'm just going to shrink this brush down a bit. And I'm going to keep the twining tendrils up, but on the other screen. So what I'm looking at is the way that these curl back underneath themselves and they turn into leaves when they do that. So I'm going to add a couple of those elements into here, mainly on these big parts where they're twining around. So I'm just looking to see how that worked. So it kind of came back on itself like that. And here I'm just drawing like the kind of the gesture of the leaf. I focus mainly, whether it's illustration or a pattern design like this, I care more about the gesture than I do about any of the details, because a lot can be said in the gesture of a piece. And I'm going to do the same over here. And I think, yeah, I'm going to bring that one in this way. See how that looks. Might curve in a little too far on itself, but that's okay. I can clean that up. Bring that down, and then this one here I'm going to bring out a little bit further. So essentially the leaves are kind of curling under themselves. And let's see if I can change the opacity on these. Opacity. Okay, and then I can delete this layer. I don't need that anymore. Okay, so I've just brought down the opacity so I can work over this, and this is just where I'm going to be refining this shape. So this will be the last thing I do today, because the next step after this would be taking this shape, which I'm actually going to leave the diamond up, taking this shape and then bringing it into Illustrator and turning it into the repeat. So I'm just going to work on kind of making this a little bit tighter, but not so tight that there's no room to change it once I get it into Illustrator. And I think I want to have some kind of central bit to that leaf, just to give it a little more movement in Illustrator. And I'll draw the twining bits in last, because they're easy to do with a bigger brush. So now as I'm drawing it, I'm drawing these to be a bit sharper, a bit pointier. So when I draw the grapevines, I think I'm going to make those a bit pointier too, more like they are in reality than I was originally thinking. Let me just bring that up again. Okay. Wonder how, does it have a lasso tool? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to try to select out this and maybe cut. Okay. Oh, I see. And then I want to paste it up here, and then I'll work from that. And then I think I should be able to turn off. Yep, okay. So now I can draw these leaves a little easier. So let's see, so we have the cut-in shape, and then the cut-in shape, cut and shave. This is another way that I draw things. It's now totally opposite of what I was doing before. I apologize for that. It's not my intent, but it's also an easy way of getting the shapes aligned properly. There we go. That's probably all I'm going to need to put it into Illustrator. It gives me enough of a sense. And I would make it a little more detailed than this, but actually not all that much. So I'm just going to end up putting in a bit more on the edges of the leaves. But as you can see, I'm working really small. This is how I tend to prefer to work. I don't zoom in unless I really have to. And even then, I'm very careful about how much I zoom in, because one of the things you can end up doing when you're zooming things in is really kind of taking out all the kind of like the imperfections and the bits that make it interesting. Hold on, I'll get to your question in 1 second. Okay. What happens if you make the leaves too tight at this stage? So if I make this too tight, and if I try to really get in there and, hold on, I have to figure out how to zoom again. Nope, that's not it. Anyway, if I get in there and I try to make it really tight and really detailed right now, first of all, since I'm taking it into Illustrator, a lot of that is unnecessary information because I'm going to have to create it all again inside Illustrator. So I don't need to do that. Also, what can happen is when you make something very tight and very detailed, then when you go to copy over it, it's much more like you feel like you have to copy it perfectly because you already made it perfectly. So you would want to do that. So a lot of times if you copy over something perfectly, once you bring it in here, let me open this one. So if I took this design and I really went in there and I made all these lines absolutely perfect, by the time I take this into Illustrator, I'm going to want to go back over those lines really perfectly. And it starts to make the whole thing feel very static and very stiff. And when a lot of people are talking about their sketch looked great, but then when they took it to finish, it looked too stiff and too perfect, that's a lot of the reason. You take a sketch that has that fluid movement to it, like this one, and then you take it and you start to go over here and really get into these details and like really work out where all those lines are. And then when you take it to Illustrator, it's almost like you can't deviate from that because you spent all that time making it perfect. I don't want to do that. Like this right here is as detailed as I will ever make a sketch to take it into Illustrator. And I don't have a clue what's going on with half this stuff. Like, it's all over the place. But let me show you what I made with that. Is that this one? Nope, that's not that one. So let me find it. Is it this one? Geez, I don't even remember which one this was. Maybe it was this one? Oh, I can't open it. Never mind. It's in Illustrator. Anyway, when I took this into Illustrator, I didn't go over these lines exactly. I kind of gave it its own flavor and its own moment because it gives, like, you're in a different mood when you go do that. And you're not like, in the exact same frame of mind, and it just makes, I shouldn't have opened Illustrator. Sorry, it's going crazy over here. It just makes it a lot more interesting if you haven't taken it too tight. So all I'm going to do with this really is make those lines where I can see where they're at. I can see how these are scrolling, but I'm probably going to take this, when I go into Illustrator, I'm going to change how these things work because also it's a totally different tool. I use the pen tool in Illustrator. Apparently there's a pen tool here too, but I don't use the pen tool in Photoshop very often. So it's a totally different tool and it's a totally different vibe. And actually some of these things I would actually do with a brush tool, where a lot of the curve and how it circles back on itself, that's going to be dictated by how how the tool itself is set up, which I'll do inside Illustrator. So I don't really have to worry about what they look like right now. It's not going to look anything like this. Okay, I think though, this is the element that I'm going to take into Illustrator next week. And I'm really hoping that next week Illustrator is working. So I think with these leaves, let me zoom in a little bit, pluses and minuses. So I'm just going to show on one of these what I'm planning so that when I bring this into Illustrator, I can see that. So I'm just going to do like a 3-fold spiky bit here. And same thing here. Just like that. And then these are going to curve back in on themselves. So I'm going to bring those in a lot more. And let me see if I can get an eraser. And then when I actually do these inside Illustrator, I think I would actually curve these back on themselves. So there ends up being, let me see if I can get the eraser small enough to do this. There ends up being like little bits of white space in here that kind of shows that the leaves are overlapping with one another. A bit like this. There. So it kind of shows that I have an overlap there, and that's what I'm going for. That's probably as, you know, it's you know, it gives me the information I need without being too much. And that's all that I really need at this point. I'll scroll back out. So then when I put this together, this shape right here will be a repeat of it. Same thing over here. So it'll have that kind of more a diamond look as opposed to like the square look that I had before. So instead of, you know, perfectly square like this, it'll be a lot tighter of a diamond shape like this, which is what I was going for in the first place. It's a subtle difference, I'll admit, but when you're setting up the repeat, it can look like a huge difference because this one looks a lot boxier than this one is going to look. Like that. So I think that's where I'm going to leave things today. Hopefully I won't have the technical difficulties next week that I'm having right now. And I'll be taking this into Illustrator and, you know, it needs a little bit more. I'll zhuzh it up a bit. Definitely be zhuzhing it up a little bit. But this kind of idea of the simple twining elements and the grapevines is what I was going for, I think, in the first place. Excuse me. Yeah, so I hope you'll join me next week, same time, 3 o'clock on Thursday. I'm also going to be starting, I'm not sure if they'll be live or not, but I'm going to be starting doing videos that are art tip related on Tuesdays. I'll be releasing those on Tuesdays, I think. And then we're also going to be putting together some tech tip videos about what we're doing, kind of in real time, what we're learning about streaming in YouTube to show more about our art, my art. And Dan will be joining me for that, where he'll be walking you through what we did to set this up and what we're going to be doing in the future as we expand. So hopefully you'll join me for that. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time, Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. See you then.